Welcome to today's deep dive,
Oh, yeah.
where we'll be exploring the work of Hannah Arendt,
Definitely a good one.
a political theorist
Mm-hmm.
whose ideas continue to resonate even today.
Mm-hmm.
We're using those excerpts you sent over from Hannah Arendt, key concepts,
Right.
which seems like the perfect starting point for our deep dive today.
It's a great book.
It really captures the essence of her thought.
It does.
So jumping right in,
Yeah.
Arendt wasn't just an academic in an ivory tower.
No, not at all.
Her personal experiences deeply shaped her work.
Yeah.
Imagine being a Jewish refugee
Oh, my God.
fleeing Nazi Germany.
Right.
That would definitely make anyone question everything.
It really makes you wonder how anyone could go through something like that
Exactly.
and not want to really understand how and why the world works the way it does.
And then on top of that, she studies with these philosophical giants,
Right.
Heidegger and Husserl.
Oh, yeah.
What about Karl Jaspers, though?
Oh, Jasper.
The book mentioned she was close with him. So how did he influence her thinking?
Jaspers was really important to her.
Yeah.
He really instilled in her this belief that philosophy should be connected to real-world issues.
I see.
It shouldn't just be some abstract,
Right.
theoretical exercise.
Right.
And that's something you see throughout all of her work.
So we've got this incredible mind
Yeah.
shaped by intense historical events,
Right.
mentored by some of the most important thinkers of her time.
Mm-hmm.
What were the big questions that she was grappling with?
Well, Arendt was deeply concerned with what it means to be human
Okay.
in a political world.
Hmm.
She wanted to understand freedom,
Okay.
the potential of totalitarian regimes, which really frightened her,
Right.
and how individual choices and judgments play out in the political arena.
It sounds like she was trying to figure out
Yeah.
why things go so wrong in human society.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
She was trying to understand the fragility of human affairs, especially when it comes to politics.
So how did she approach that?
One of the key concepts she developed was the idea of the vita activa, or the active life.
Okay.
And she broke this down into three fundamental activities:
Hmm.
labor, work, and action.
Okay, so we all work in labor, I guess, but break that down a little further.
Sure. So you can think of labor as those tasks that are necessary for survival,
Right.
things like cooking, cleaning, that kind of thing.
Right.
Work is more about creating something lasting in the world, building a house, composing a symphony, writing a book.
I see.
But action is where it gets really interesting.
Oh.
Action for Arendt is about engaging with others in the public sphere. It's about coming together to make decisions and shape the world.
So is she saying that true freedom is only possible when we're actively involved?
That's exactly what she believed,
Okay.
that true freedom lies in action.
Wow.
Because when we act in the public sphere, we're not just reacting to circumstances. We're actually creating something new.
But isn't political action always so unpredictable?
Oh, absolutely.
Like you can't guarantee things will turn out how you want.
You're right. Action is inherently unpredictable. And that's what Arendt found so fascinating about it.
Right.
When we act in the public sphere, we introduce something new into the world,
Right.
and we can't fully control the consequences.
So that's where her ideas about forgiveness come in.
Exactly.
But how does forgiveness, which most people see as a personal, moral thing,
Right.
how does that become political?
Well, she saw forgiveness as a way to break free from the chains of the past, those cycles of revenge and violence that can trap us. It's about acknowledging that actions have unintended consequences,
Right.
and sometimes we need to hit the reset button to move forward.
So even in politics, we need to be able to say, okay, we messed up, let's move on.
Exactly.
But how do you balance that with taking responsibility?
That's where individual judgment comes in. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or condoning wrongdoing.
Right.
It's about recognizing the complexity of human action and choosing to break free from the past.
It's like having the courage to say
Yeah.
things went wrong, but we can choose to act differently now.
Exactly.
Now, what about this modern focus on the social?
Oh, yeah.
I know Arendt was pretty skeptical of that.
Yeah, she was.
Why is that?
She saw this growing emphasis on the social as potentially overshadowing the truly political.
Okay.
She worried that it blurred the lines between public and private life, and that it could lead to a world where everything becomes about administration and management,
Oh, I see.
rather than genuine political action.
So it's not about ignoring social issues.
Yeah, not at all.
It's about making sure they don't dominate the public sphere
Yes.
and crowd out opportunities for real political engagement.
Exactly.
So she's not saying we should ignore those concerns.
Right.
It's more about finding that balance
Exactly.
so that the social doesn't completely take over.
Right.
For her, healthy politics need spaces
Yes.
where different perspectives can clash and new ideas can emerge.
Absolutely.
It makes me think about how much political discourse happens online now.
Oh, yeah.
Algorithms keep us in echo chambers.
It's a problem.
I probably wouldn't have liked that to us.
She definitely saw the value in face-to-face interaction where people have to confront different viewpoints directly. It forces you to think more critically
Right.
and engage with complexity in a way that just doesn't happen online.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of confronting uncomfortable truths,
Right.
Arendt's analysis of totalitarianism was groundbreaking.
It was.
And she was writing from experience.
Yeah.
I mean, she lived through Nazi Germany.
It wasn't just theoretical for her.
Not at all.
No.
So what did she see as the defining characteristics of this form of evil?
For Arendt, totalitarianism wasn't just about brutality and violence.
Okay.
It was about systematically dismantling the human capacity to think and judge independently.
It was about crushing individual thought,
Right.
replacing it with blind obedience,
Wow.
and ultimately eradicating meaning itself.
And that leads us to her concept of the banality of evil, right? This idea that terrible acts of cruelty
Right.
can be carried out by ordinary people who are just following orders.
This concept came from her observations of Adolf Eichmann,
Right.
a high-ranking Nazi official responsible for the logistics of the Holocaust.
Right.
And she was struck by his ordinariness, how bureaucratic and emotionless he seemed.
Really?
It really challenged the idea that monstrous acts require monstrous individuals.
So are you saying that any of us...
That was her point,
Okay.
that anyone is capable of participating in horrific acts
Wow.
if they're not thinking critically or taking responsibility for their own actions.
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
So just to recap,
Yeah.
we've got freedom, action, judgment,
Mm-hmm.
the dangers of totalitarianism,
Right.
and this really unsettling concept of the banality of evil.
Yeah. These are some heavy ideas,
They are.
but I'm starting to see how they connect.
Okay.
But I'm curious about Arendt's thoughts on tradition and authority.
Yeah.
You know, this idea that they've been lost in the modern world.
Right.
How did she see that playing out?
Well, she saw that loss as a double-edged sword.
Okay.
On the one hand, the erosion of traditional authority creates dangers without a shared sense of meaning and purpose.
Right.
People become more susceptible to manipulation and totalitarian ideologies.
But there's another side to this, right?
Exactly.
What's the potential upside to this loss?
It opens up possibilities for new forms of political action.
I see.
It allows individuals to step up and take responsibility for shaping their own destinies.
So it's like a more uncertain world,
It is.
but also one with more potential for individual and collective agency,
Yes.
where we have to create meaning ourselves instead of inheriting it.
You got it.
And that brings us to another one of her concepts, the right to have rights. Arendt was really concerned about stateless people,
She was.
those who are denied basic rights and a place in the world.
Right.
So for her, this was a symptom of a problem with the nation-state system.
Exactly.
Right.
She saw how nation-states could exclude people who don't fit neatly into their categories, creating this whole class of people who are essentially seen as superfluous, disposable.
And that feels very relevant today.
Oh, it is.
With the global refugee crisis,
Absolutely.
and the rise of nationalism,
Yes.
all incredibly thought-provoking.
It is.
But I'm wondering how we actually apply these ideas to our own lives. You know, what would Arendt say about how we should live,
Right.
how we should engage in politics, how we should try to make the world better?
Well, Arendt wasn't one for giving easy answers or step-by-step instructions, but if you look at her work as a whole,
Okay.
there are some key principles that emerge.
Like what?
One of the most important is the idea of thinking for yourself. Remember, she saw the erosion of critical thinking as a key factor in the rise of totalitarianism.
So it's not just about having opinions,
Right.
but about forming them through careful consideration, and being able to justify them.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's what she called reflective judgment.
Reflective judgment.
It's a demanding process, but for Arendt, it was the foundation of individual freedom and responsible political action.
Okay.
And it's not something we do in isolation.
Right.
Remember, she also emphasized the importance of action, of engaging with the world, of participating in the public sphere.
So it's about balancing critical thinking with decisive action.
You got it.
Testing our ideas in the real world.
Yes.
And adjusting our thinking based on experience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like thinking and action are two sides of the same coin.
For Arendt, they were inseparable. You think in order to act, and you act in order to test and refine your thinking.
That engagement happens most meaningfully in public, where we encounter different perspectives and work together.
Absolutely.
That brings us back to her critique of the social.
Right.
It's not that she was against people taking care of their needs or creating things in the world.
It was more about the importance of having a distinct political sphere where we can address collective concerns and make decisions about how we want to live together.
She was also wary of bureaucracy.
Oh, yes.
Those processes that can dehumanize people and stifle creativity.
Exactly.
For her, that was a threat to freedom,
Yeah.
meaningful political action. So I'm hearing a lot about thinking critically, engaging in the public sphere, resisting the overreach of the social.
Right.
But where does power fit into all of this?
Power.
Yeah.
This is where her work can get a little challenging because she had a very specific definition of power.
How so?
Well, most people think of power as control dominance, getting others to do what you want.
Yeah.
But that's not what Arendt had in mind.
So what does she mean by power?
For Arendt, true power arises from collective action.
Okay.
From people coming together in a shared space to achieve a common goal.
So it's about cooperation.
Exactly.
Solidarity, that we're in this together feeling.
That's the key.
Wow.
Power for her wasn't about domination. It was about collaboration.
I see.
About the collective energy and creativity that emerges when people come together as equals.
So it's power with others?
Exactly.
Not power over.
Precisely.
So it's not enough to just think for yourself.
Yeah.
You also need to connect with others.
Yeah.
To build collective power, to act together.
Absolutely.
But that's not always easy, is it?
It's not.
I mean, we've seen movements start with that energy and then fizzle out.
It's an ongoing struggle. A constant push and pull between the forces of change and the status quo.
Right.
But that's not a reason to give up.
Okay.
It's a reminder to be vigilant, to keep pushing back, to never assume that the fight for freedom and justice is over.
So constantly questioning, challenging, and creating.
Yes.
Recognizing that freedom is something we constantly build and defend.
Exactly.
I like that.
And I think she would also emphasize the importance of forgiveness in this process.
Forgiveness.
Yes.
Not as a way to excuse wrongdoing.
No.
But as a way to break free from those cycles of violence and create new beginnings.
Yes.
So recognizing we all make mistakes, that we're all capable of both good and evil.
Absolutely.
And that we need to find ways to move forward together.
I think that's a key takeaway from Arendt's work.
Okay.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity and our capacity for both good and evil and finding ways to move forward together.
This has been incredibly insightful.
It's been a pleasure.
But before we move on,
yes,
I want to circle back to one of the most unsettling ideas we've discussed.
Oh, okay.
The banality of evil.
It is a haunting concept, isn't it?
It really makes you question your own assumptions about good and evil. It makes you wonder if anyone could be capable of such acts.
Right.
It's a terrifying thought.
Arendt's point wasn't to excuse the horrors of the Holocaust. It was to warn us that evil can manifest in unexpected ways. It can be perpetrated by everyday people. And that we all have a responsibility to be vigilant, to think critically, and to resist the temptation to blindly follow orders or conform to the crowd.
So it's a call to individual responsibility, to moral courage.
Absolutely.
To having the willingness to stand up and say no.
Yes.
Even when it's hard or even dangerous.
Exactly.
And it's also a call to pay attention to the systems that can make evil seem banal. You know, the ones that normalize cruelty and dehumanization.
Right.
Because as Arendt showed us, it's not enough to just focus on the individuals.
You have to look at the broader context.
Right.
The social and political forces that create the conditions for evil to flourish.
It makes you wonder, how can we recognize those forces at work today?
That's the question, isn't it?
And how can we resist them effectively?
That's what we all need to figure out.
Right.
And I think Arendt would urge us to approach these questions with clear-eyed realism, but also unwavering hope.
So understanding how power works.
Yes.
How it can be used for both good and evil.
Right.
And how we can challenge those systems that perpetuate injustice.
Absolutely.
That's what we need to be thinking about.
It is. It is. We've explored some pretty complex concepts.
We have.
But I think what makes Arndt's work so fascinating is that it speaks to something so fundamental about what it means to be human.
Right.
You know, living in a world where freedom is constantly under threat. And where power can be used for good or evil.
And that feels especially relevant today.
It does.
With everything going on in the world.
Yeah.
Political polarization, economic inequality, climate change, threats to democracy.
It can feel overwhelming sometimes.
It does.
Like we're caught in a whirlwind of events that we have no control over. But I think our aunt would remind us that we're not passive bystanders. We have the capacity to act, to shape the world around us.
Even in small ways.
Even in small, seemingly insignificant ways.
So it's not about waiting for some big revolution.
Right.
Or relying on politicians to solve all our problems.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing our own power as individuals.
Yes.
To make a difference in our own spheres of influence.
That's what she believed. She was very suspicious of any ideology that promised easy solutions or utopian visions. She believed that real change happens through a messy and often unpredictable process.
Okay.
You know, people coming together,
right,
deliberating, acting in concert.
This makes me think about her concept of the social.
Oh, yeah.
She wasn't against taking care of basic needs or forming communities.
Right.
But she was wary of how the social could overshadow the political,
right,
turning everything into administration and management rather than genuine public engagement.
That's a key point. Arendt believed that a healthy society needs spaces where people can come together as equals.
Okay.
Not just as consumers or clients, but as citizens who have a stake in shaping the world.
So it's about resisting the urge to reduce everything to efficiency and bureaucracy.
Yes.
It's about creating spaces for real political discourse.
Absolutely.
For that messy, passionate engagement that she saw as essential for freedom.
That's what she believed.
I'm starting to get it.
Good.
So it's not about rejecting the social altogether.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
Exactly.
And making sure there's room for genuine political action.
You got it.
And that can feel inspiring even if it's challenging.
It can.
It reminds us that freedom isn't something that's just handed to us. It's something we constantly have to fight for, to create and recreate through our actions and interactions.
And through our relationships with others.
Now, what about forgiveness?
Forgiveness.
Earlier, we talked about how she saw it as a political act, a way to break free from cycles of violence and revenge. But how do we actually practice forgiveness?
It's a tough question.
It is.
And one that Arendt wrestled with throughout her life.
Right.
She believed that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or condoning wrongdoing.
Okay.
It was about recognizing the complexity of human action. The fact that we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that sometimes the only way to move forward is to break free from resentment and anger.
So it's not about letting people off the hook.
No.
It's more about recognizing our shared humanity.
Yes.
Our capacity for both good and evil.
Absolutely.
And finding a way to create new beginnings, even in the face of past wrongs.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
I'm struck by how relevant this feels to our current political climate.
Oh, it is.
There's so much anger and division.
Yeah.
It feels like we've lost the ability to listen to each other.
Right.
To understand different perspectives, to find common ground.
I think Arendt would say that's exactly why her work is so important today. She believed that the ability to think for ourselves, to engage in dialogue, and to practice forgiveness were essential for preventing tyranny.
Wow.
And creating a just and humane society.
So how do we cultivate those qualities in ourselves and our communities?
Yeah, good question.
How do we create spaces where people feel safe to express their opinions?
Right.
Even if they're unpopular.
Those are some of the most important questions we can ask today.
They are.
And I think Arendt would urge us to approach them with humility, but also with a sense of urgency.
Okay.
Because she believed that freedom is fragile.
Right.
It requires constant vigilance and effort.
So we can't take it for granted.
No.
We have to actively create it and defend it.
Absolutely.
And It's a collective effort.
It is.
It requires us to engage in the public sphere,
right,
to build relationships with people who are different from us,
yes,
and to challenge injustice wherever we see it.
that's what it means to be a citizen.
I'm starting to see how all these ideas fit together.
Good.
Thinking for ourselves, engaging in public discourse, practicing forgiveness,
Yes.
building solidarity with those who are different.
It's all connected.
These are all essential for being a free and responsible citizen.
That's what Arendt would say.
It's really powerful.
It is.
And it's not just about grand gestures or heroic acts of resistance.
right.
It's also about the everyday choices we make, the way we interact with each other,
Yeah.
the way we participate in our communities.
Exactly.
Arendt believed that every act, no matter how small, has the potential to make a difference. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness,
Yes.
our shared responsibility for shaping the world.
I think that's a key takeaway from her work.
It's almost like a ripple effect.
I like that.
Every act of courage, compassion, integrity creates ripples that spread outward,
It's a beautiful image.
influencing others and creating positive change.
That's a great way to think about it.
I wonder what she would think about how her ideas are being used today.
I think she'd be thrilled.
By new generations of thinkers and activists.
I think so.
Are there any specific movements or initiatives that embody her principles?
Oh, there are so many examples.
Like what?
Think about the movements for social justice, for environmental protection,
What?
for democratic reform.
Right.
All of these movements draw on Arendt's ideas about collective action, thinking for ourselves, holding power accountable.
It's inspiring that her work is still so relevant,
It is.
even decades after her death.
Her legacy is a reminder that ideas matter, that they have the power to shape the world.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive into her work,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways you hope listeners will glean?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they come away with a deeper understanding of what it means to be a free and responsible citizen in a world that's so complex and challenging.
And beyond that.
I hope they feel inspired to engage in the public sphere, to think critically about the issues that matter to them,
Right.
and to find ways to act together to create a more just and humane society.
That's a powerful message,
It is.
especially in these times.
Arendt's work reminds us that we're not powerless, even when things seem bleak. Right? We have the capacity to make a difference, both individually and collectively.
Right.
And it's up to each of us to choose what kind of world we want to create.
Now, before we move on too far,
Yeah.
I do want to come back to that idea of the social,
Okay.
and how wary Arendt was of it overshadowing the political.
Right.
I'm thinking about technology and how it's shaping our political landscape today.
That's interesting.
What do you think Arendt would say about the internet and social media?
That's a great question.
One that I think a lot of people are wrestling with.
It is a tough one.
On the one hand, technology has created amazing opportunities for connection,
Oh, yeah.
for sharing information,
Right.
for mobilizing people around common causes.
It's amazing.
But on the other hand,
Sure.
it can also be used to spread misinformation,
Oh, absolutely.
to manipulate people,
Yes.
to create those echo chambers where we're only exposed to information that confirms our existing beliefs.
It's a real problem.
So it makes you wonder if her warnings about conformity and the loss of critical thinking
Yeah.
are even more relevant now in the age of social media.
I think they are.
So how do we navigate this new digital world
Right.
in a way that's aligned with our principles?
It's a challenge.
How do we use technology to actually promote freedom and democracy?
It's about being mindful of how we use it,
Hmm.
being critical of the information we consume,
Okay.
finding ways to have real conversations with people who have different viewpoints.
So it's not about rejecting technology altogether,
Right.
but about using it in a way that supports our values and our goals.
I think that's what Arendt would say.
Got it.
Technology is a tool.
Right.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
So it's up to us to decide how we want to use it.
That's right.
So her work can help us think about the challenges and opportunities of the digital age.
I think it's incredibly relevant.
But navigating this new world can be tough.
It can.
Are there any strategies that you find effective for promoting Arendtian values online?
I think one key strategy is to cultivate media literacy.
Media literacy.
Being able to evaluate the information we see online,
Okay.
distinguish between credible sources and misinformation,
Right.
and understand how algorithms and filter bubbles work.
So it's about being an active and informed consumer of information.
Exactly.
Not just passively scrolling and accepting everything we see.
Right.
And what about face-to-face interaction?
It's still important.
Aren't really emphasized that.
She did.
So how do we maintain those vibrant public spaces in a world that's increasingly dominated by online interaction?
It's about being intentional about creating opportunities for people to come together, to have conversations, to take acts.
Supporting local libraries, community centers,
Attending town hall meetings, participating in protests, or just gathering with friends and neighbors to talk about the issues.
So it's about recognizing that the public sphere isn't just online.
Exactly.
It's also in the physical spaces where we live and work and play.
It's about being present in the world.
Right.
And engaging with the people around us.
It makes me think about her warnings about totalitarianism.
Oh, yeah.
And the importance of individual judgment and moral courage.
Those are crucial concepts.
How do we apply those lessons in a world where technology can be used to manipulate us?
I think it's about being aware of how technology can be used to erode our privacy, to track our movements, to influence our behavior.
So being careful about what we share online.
Yes.
But also being aware of the systems of surveillance that are often operating behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And being willing to speak out against injustice.
Yes.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Even when it's risky.
That's what she believed.
She did.
That silence in the face of tyranny is a form of complicity.
It's a powerful statement.
And it makes me think about that concept of the banality of evil again.
Right.
It's so easy to become complacent.
It is.
To go along with the crowd, to tell ourselves we're not responsible.
That's why her work is so challenging.
Right.
It forces us to confront our own capacity for complicity, to recognize that even small acts of obedience or indifference can contribute to great evils.
So cultivating that sense of personal responsibility.
Absolutely.
Recognizing we all have a role to play in shaping the world.
That's the key.
And that freedom is a constant struggle.
It is.
It requires vigilance and effort.
It does.
It's a reminder that we can't be passive bystanders.
No.
We have to be active participants in creating the world we want to live in.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so we've talked about how Arendt's ideas can help us think about the digital age.
Yeah.
But I want to shift gears a bit and talk about her concept of the right to have rights.
Okay.
It can sound a bit abstract.
It can.
But I think it gets to the heart of what she saw as a fundamental crisis of our time.
It does.
This idea that the need for belonging,
right,
recognition for a place in the world where our rights are respected, that this need is being threatened.
Especially in the modern world.
Especially for those who are stateless.
Yes.
Who are denied the protection of a nation-state.
She argued that the nation-state system, while it has its benefits, can also be incredibly exclusionary. It creates categories of people who are deemed undesirable, unworthy of belonging.
It makes me think of all the refugees and migrants around the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Fleeing war, persecution, poverty, only to be met with closed borders and hostility.
That's what Arendt was concerned about. She saw the plight of stateless people as a symptom of a deeper crisis.
A crisis in our understanding of human rights.
Exactly.
And that continues to this day.
It does.
So it's not just about providing aid or asylum.
Right.
It's about rethinking the very foundations of our political systems and our ethical obligations to those who are different from us.
She's asking us to think about what it means to be human.
Right.
What do we owe to each other? How do we create a world where everyone has the right to have rights?
And these questions feel even more urgent now.
They do.
As the world becomes increasingly interconnected.
Absolutely.
What would Arendt say about the state of the world today?
Oh, that's a tough one.
With the rise of nationalism, the erosion of democracy,
the growing gap between rich and poor,
the environmental crisis.
It's hard to say for sure.
Right.
But I think she would be deeply concerned by these trends. She saw firsthand the dangers of totalitarianism.
Right.
Societies that dehumanize entire groups of people.
Yeah.
And I think she would see some of those same tendencies at work today.
It's not just about abstract theories, then. It's about the real-world impact of these ideas.
Exactly.
On the lives of millions of people.
Arendt's work reminds us that ideas have consequences. That the choices we make individually and collectively really matter.
It makes me think about her concept of action.
Yes.
And the unpredictable consequences of our choices.
That was key for her.
Right.
She believed that action is always risky. We can never fully anticipate or control the outcomes.
So we can't let that paralyze us?
No.
We have to act even with that uncertainty.
She believed that action is what makes us human.
Wow.
It's how we create meaning and purpose.
So embracing the uncertainty, the messiness, the risk,
Yes.
that's part of being human.
That's what she would say.
And recognizing that we're all in this together.
Absolutely.
We have a shared responsibility for shaping the world.
It's a collective effort.
So how do we balance individual freedom with the need for collective action?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
And I don't think Arendt would offer an easy answer. It's a constant process of negotiation, of finding ways to balance competing interests and values.
But we have to engage in that process.
Yes.
We can't just hope that someone else will figure it out.
Absolutely not.
It's on us.
Arendt's work is a call to action.
Right.
It reminds us that we have a role to play
Okay.
in shaping the world we want to live in.
And we have the power to make a difference.
Yes.
Even in the face of these huge challenges.
Even in the darkest of times,
Right.
there's always the possibility for hope, for renewal, for creating a better future.
What gives you hope?
You know what gives me hope?
Yeah.
Is seeing so many young people engaged in activism,
Okay.
raising their voices, demanding change.
That's encouraging.
They're not content with the status quo.
Right.
They're not afraid to challenge authority.
Yeah.
They're using their creativity and energy to build a better world.
It speaks to Arendt's belief in the power of action.
It does.
That each generation can create something new and break free from the past.
And it's not just young people.
Right.
There are so many individuals and organizations working for human rights, environmental protection, social justice. They may not always make the headlines, but they're making a real difference every day.
It's a reminder that even small acts of kindness and compassion can have a ripple effect.
I love that.
They can contribute to a larger movement for change.
That's what Arendt called the web of human relationships.
The web of human relationships.
She believed we're all interconnected.
Right.
Our actions have a profound impact on each other, and even small acts of courage and compassion can have far-reaching consequences.
What a beautiful thought.
It is.
So what are some practical steps our listeners can take
Oh, that's a good question.
to embody Arendt's ideas in their own lives?
Well, there are so many ways to answer that.
Like what?
It could involve getting involved in local politics, volunteering in your community, supporting organizations that are working for causes you care about, or even just having conversations with friends and family about the issues that matter.
So it's not about finding the one right answer.
No.
It's about finding what resonates with you,
Exactly.
what speaks to your passions and your values.
And remembering that it's an ongoing process.
Right.
It's a journey of learning and growth.
Being open to new ideas.
Yes.
Challenging our own assumptions.
Being willing to make mistakes and learn from them.
That's what it's all about.
I think that's what Arendt would say.
Right.
It's about challenging us to be more thoughtful, more engaged,
Okay.
more courageous in our efforts to create a better world.
Well, this has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
He has.
We've just scratched the surface of Arendt's work.
I think so.
But I've come away with a deeper understanding of her ideas
Good.
and how relevant they are today.
I'm glad to hear that.
And for those listening,
Yes.
engaging with her work is a process.
It is.
It's not about memorizing definitions or theories.
Right.
It's about wrestling with these ideas,
Yeah.
questioning assumptions, and finding ways to apply them to our own lives,
I think that's the key.
and to our communities.
Absolutely.
It's also about having those difficult conversations, engaging with different perspectives,
Right.
and looking for opportunities to act.
Exactly.
So many big, complex ideas today.
We've covered a lot.
But I want to leave you with one final thought from Arendt.
Okay.
She said, "The world is not finished. It is constantly being created."
Oh, I love that quote.
What do you think she meant by that?
I think she was reminding us that we're not passive bystanders. We all have the power to shape the world
Right.
through our actions, our choices, our relationships.
It's a call to action,
It is.
an invitation to embrace the uncertainty of being human
I think that's a perfect way to put it.
and the possibilities.
And the possibilities.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Hannah Arendt's world.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
We've been talking about sources of strength and hope.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about Arendt's ideas on thinking and acting. She didn't see those as separate things, did she?
Oh, no, not at all.
How so?
For Arendt's thinking and acting were completely intertwined.
Okay.
She really believed that true thinking always has to be connected to action. to the real world, to the choices we make and the consequences we face.
So it's not about just sitting around and thinking about abstract ideas.
Right. It's not about being in an ivory tower.
It's about using our minds to engage with the world.
Exactly.
To try to understand it.
Yes.
To change it.
For her, thinking wasn't just a solitary thing.
Okay.
It was a way of being in the world, of figuring out how to act responsibly.
It makes me think of that quote.
Which one?
Thinking without action is sterile action. Without thinking is reckless.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It really captures that interplay between thought and action.
It does.
And how they inform and enrich each other.
That's a great way to put it.
But that can feel overwhelming sometimes.
It can.
Especially with how complex the world is.
It's true.
So where do we even begin?
Well, I think Arendt would say the first step is to cultivate what she called the faculty of judgment.
The faculty of judgment.
And that's not about following some set of rules.
Okay.
It's about developing the ability to really make sense of the world around us, to weigh different perspectives, to arrive at decisions that are thoughtful and decisive.
So learning to think critically.
Yes.
But also being willing to take action.
Absolutely.
Even when we don't know what the outcome will be.
Exactly. And that's where action comes in.
Okay.
For action wasn't just about doing things. It was about introducing something new into the world.
Right.
Something that couldn't have been predicted or planned for.
So it's embracing the unexpected.
Yes.
The unpredictable.
Right.
The possibility that our actions will have unintended consequences.
That's part of it.
That can be scary.
It can be. But Arendt's believe that's what makes life so interesting.
Wow.
So meaningful.
It's the fact that we can create.
Yeah.
That we can change things. Even if we don't know how it will all turn out.
We leave our mark on the world.
It makes me think of her concept of forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
It seems like being willing to forgive is so important.
It is.
If you're going to act in the world knowing things might not go as planned.
It's essential.
Because we all make mistakes.
We do.
So how do we actually cultivate this kind of thinking and acting in our own lives?
That's a great question.
How do we become more Arendtian in our approach to the world?
Well, I think one way is to cultivate curiosity.
Okay.
You know, a willingness to ask questions, to challenge what we think we know, to be open to different perspectives.
On not just accepting things at face value,
right,
but really digging deeper.
Yes.
Asking why.
Exactly.
And being open to being wrong.
That's a big word.
And being willing to talk to people who have different views.
Oh, that's crucial for Arendt.
Okay.
She believed that real thinking and judgment can only happen in conversation, you know, when we're exposed to different ideas.
It makes me think about how divided our society feels right now.
It's tough, isn't it?
It's so hard to have a conversation about important things without it turning into a fight.
I think Arendt would be saddened by that, but not surprised.
Okay.
She really understood how dangerous ideological thinking can be.
Right.
That tendency to oversimplify complex issues and to demonize anyone who disagrees with us.
So how do we break out of these echo chambers?
It's hard.
How do we create spaces for real dialogue?
It starts with listening. Really listening to those who see things differently.
Okay.
Trying to understand where they're coming from, even if we don't agree.
So being open to learning from each other.
Yes, even from those we disagree with.
That takes humility.
It does.
Recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
It's something we could all work on, especially in a world that's so complex and interconnected.
It's about working together.
Yeah.
Even when we disagree.
Finding common ground.
Recognizing that we're all in this together.
That's what it's all about.
Well, we've covered so much in this deep dive into Hannah Arendt's work.
It's been quite a journey.
We've explored her ideas about freedom, action, power, judgment. Forgiveness.
Yeah.
The relationship between thinking and acting.
It's been challenging, but rewarding.
It really has.
Arendt's work is demanding.
It is.
But it offers so much insight.
Yeah, it gives us a framework for understanding the world.
And for finding our place in it.
And for those listening.
Yes.
Remember that engaging with Arendt's work is a process.
It is a journey.
It's not about memorizing things.
No.
It's about wrestling with these ideas,
yes.
challenging yourself.
Absolutely.
And finding ways to apply them to your life.
To make them your own.
And don't be afraid to have those tough conversations.
Yeah.
Engage with different views.
And look for opportunities to act.
We've been talking about some big ideas.
We have.
But I want to leave you with one final thought from Arendt.
Okay.
She said, "The world is not finished. It is constantly being created."
Ooh, that's a good one.
What do you think she meant by that?
I think she meant that we're not just passive observers. We all have the power to shape what the world becomes.
Through our action,
Right.
that choices.
Our relationships.
It's a call to action.
It is.
It's an invitation to embrace all the possibilities.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Hannah Arendt's world.
It's been a pleasure talking with you.
And until next time, keep thinking, keep acting, and keep creating the world you want to see.
That's a great way to end it.